My name is Frank O'Brien, and I will be chairing this hearing relative to the comprehensive permit application under the provisions of Mass General Laws, Chapter 40B, relative to the location known as 936 Brush Hill Road. Joining me this evening are my fellow board members, Jeff Mullen and Nicholas Gray. So it has been a little while since the board last met. We do have a list of items that have been provided to us by the applicant, which I had opened just a second ago. So we will bear with me as I get myself recombobulated. But let me begin by first mentioning a scheduling matter. So we have been meeting on a 3-week cycle because of the presence of several other applications under provisions of Chapter 40B, and that has seems to have worked out well. We have had a number of extensions that have been granted by the board for various good and valid reasons. And as a result, at the present time, according to my calculations, September 5th is the deadline for the board to issue a decision. If that's the case, and we continue on the 3-week cycle, it would mean that in addition to this evening's hearing, we would also be meeting on, June 22nd, July 13th, August 3rd, and we have a scheduled meeting for August 31st. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 scheduled meetings if we continue with the 3-week cycle. The questions that I would like people to ponder and to be ready to discuss at the next scheduled meeting is whether or not we should consider as a board and as the folks who are dealing with this application, whether we need to speed things up or whether we need to schedule additional hearings. I would also mention that personally, I have a conflict with the August 31st hearing. I will be returning from vacation and will be unavailable that evening. So at least one of the hearings is going to need to be rescheduled, but we need to get our hands around and our brains around whether or not we're going to have enough time, given this current schedule, to do everything that needs to be done. So far, when we've needed an extension for good cause shown, we've granted it. There's no interest, I think, on the part of this board or on the part of the Board of Appeals as a whole to delay things, but we have to be mindful of practicalities. So I'd like to put that out for folks' consideration. And I'm not asking for any suggestions or whatnot at this particular one, but I'd like folks, particularly Mr. Galvin, Mr. Schumer, to consider that and possibly make some suggestions. The other thing that I would note is that we have had a significant number of submissions since last we met, including several submissions from the applicant, many of which will be on the table for discussion this evening. We've also had a number of submissions from essentially Mr. Galvin's clients. Mr. Chesia has provided some additional material. And all of those pieces of material have been posted to the record and are included on the submission tracking sheet. So members of the public, interested parties who would like to see what has been submitted. There is a complete list, and I thank Ms. Rich as well as Tim Stravinsky for keeping us on track relative to that. This evening, our primary business will be to hear a presentation from the applicant, Mr. Schomer, relative to a set of materials that were submitted by the applicant to the board via a letter dated May 25th, and I'm going to read a portion of that letter very briefly because I think it sets the stage for this evening's hearing. And I would note in his letter, Mr. Schomer conveyed to the board 6 pieces of material evidencing a significant redesign of the project. And in his letter, Mr. Schomer notes, in summary, the enclosed plans propose to fully redesign the project as compared to the plans previously submitted. Previously, the project was proposed to consist of 2 stacked flats with an outdoor parking field between the buildings and additional parking beneath the rear building. The revised project layout and design now proposes to consolidate the 2 buildings into a single double-loaded corridor, elevator-fed building located towards the rear of the project site with 2 residential stories above a basement parking level. The proposed unit count, 20, and parking ratio, 35 spaces, remains unchanged. We thank Mr. Schomer for his letter and for the materials provided by both the applicant and by Mr. Galvin. And with that, before we begin with me turning it over to Mr. Schomer for a presentation, I'd like to pause and ask if any members of the board have any questions or comments at this point in time. All right, hearing none, seeing none. Mr. Schomer, good evening and welcome back to the Board of Appeals.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Glad to be here again, and we appreciate the board's extension of the previous hearing. We feel that the time was necessary to complete the plans and make sure that what we were presenting to you tonight was a complete package, and the additional time was well used by our team. So I think that additional 3 weeks in the process, it'll be put to good use. As you mentioned, Mr. Chair, in the letter that I submitted, we have submitted a what I would describe as a complete project redesign. And you described the previous layout of the project well. You know, what I would say, just as a brief preface, and I see that the architects and the civil engineers are bracing themselves for me to steal their thunder, which I won't do. I'll keep my remarks very brief. But in summary, from the previous design and layout of the project, the feedback that we received, you know, I would summarize it as to say that many of the pieces of the puzzle were there, but they just weren't fitting together in the exact correct way. So we took away that the density of the project at 20 units was appropriate for the site. There was a way to make it fit just in a way that was better than what we were presenting before. So the plans that we'll go through tonight, Mr. Chair, really show a full redesign of the site, consolidating the buildings into one building, moving that building closer to the Curry College property and away from the residential abutters. And what you'll see in the plans that we present tonight is really a stark difference, I would say. And the primary difference, in my opinion, has to do with the front yard setback. On the previous version of the plan, the front building, as you may recall, was an 8-unit building, 2 stories, which was set back only about 23 feet from the front property line. And that was considered by many to be too close, frankly, and too close to the residential neighbors and not in keeping with the scenic route designation of Brush Hill Road. What we have done on the revised plans that Tim from Embark Architecture will go through in a few moments is to increase the front yard setback to over 115 feet. which has created a significant amount of space in the front yard of the property for verdant landscape architecture to really go to work and to create a great residential feel with a new grading plan with a lot of new native landscaping that they'll be providing in the front yard there, as well as recreational areas, a walking path to get to the front of the site, and a new bus stop waiting area for children. So we're really proud of the plans that we're presenting to you tonight. We're excited to present them. We hope that the neighbors will perceive this as a positive change. I will note that I have not had an opportunity to review Mr. Chessie's letters. I was not aware that that had been filed, but we'll be sure to take a look at that and review and provide a response as appropriate. So as I said, Mr. Chair, I will hand things over to my team. What we would propose to do tonight is to start with Tim Loringer from Embark Architecture, and he's backed up by Jillian Tomaselli, also from Embark. And then from there, move on to landscape architecture, which is Aaron Hosseini Fitch from Verdant Landscape Design. And then from there, Mr. Chair, we'd like to go into the details of the civil engineering, stormwater management, and the infrastructure of how the pretty pictures that Embark and Verdant are going to show you will come to life below the ground. So if that's acceptable to the board tonight, I would like to hand things straight over to Tim.
The floor is yours, Mr. Schomer.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jesse. Thank you, Chairman, members of the board, members of the public. With your permission, I will share my screen now. Can everyone see that? Great.
Yes.
So I just want to, without going too much into kind of the previous scheme, I just wanted to go back to this kind of list of revision goals that we had presented at our last presentation, where we kind of gave the checkpoint of our progress with the new direction. And as Jesse had noted, I think kind of the main thing we did was consolidating those two buildings into one, which allowed us to greatly increase that front yard setback, minimizes the visual and just general feel of presence of the project on Brush Hill Road, be able to kind of visually screen it more, and also improve the vehicle maneuverability, particularly emergency access vehicles within the site itself. We also, because we switched over from the stack flat typology with the private unit entries from the exterior into each unit into a more traditional kind of interior double-loaded corridor with interior circulation, we were able to greatly simplify the grading and minimize the retaining walls around the perimeter of the site, which would reduce the impact on the existing trees and landscape buffer that existed at the property lines, particularly at that south property line. And then additionally, kind of use the extra space around the buildings for more programs, outdoor space for the residents, and then specific things like creating that pedestrian connection to Brush Hill with the bus stop that was that Jesse had noted. So just moving on from there, here is the new site plan, which is the broad strokes of which are the same that we had kind of presented back 6 weeks ago, where we had shifted the building a little bit to the south and to the rear. So we're holding that 15-yard setback off the south property line, 23 feet from the rear egress stair bump out at the rear, about 20 feet from the tightest point at the north. And then that, along with shifting the driveway entry down, allowed us to preserve a couple of the existing evergreens at the front corner of the site, as well as about midway back along the building along the rear, as well as plant additional screening and buffering vegetation to provide that separation from the abutter at 924 Brush Hill without relying on fencing to do that. Really just pulled the building away from the abutter to the north, as well as from Brush Hill Road, where we now have that 115-foot setback. The consolidated building also allowed us to get more of the parking underneath the building. So we maintained the 20 units and the 35 parking spaces for that same 1.75 parking ratio. but we're now able to get 30 of the 35 parking spaces beneath the building, which leaves only 5 surface parking spaces. So instead of that double loaded surface parking that we had previously, we now have just the one run of parking with the access drive, which just creates the large amount of area for the landscaping and a much smaller retaining wall to the south of that parking court. In terms of the bedroom ratio, we have 8 1-beds, 8 2-beds, and 4 3-beds. Here's just a kind of aerial axon from the northwest, looking back at the site here. You can start to see how we're breaking up the massing using the roofing and material changes that I'll get into in more detail when we get to the elevations. But I think this just shows kind of how we're tucking the building back into the existing vegetation, the existing hill, and kind of using the space at the front to provide some new plantings that kind of pick up the general nature of Brush Hill Road, of the properties being set back and having that kind of ample the separation from the road itself, so you don't feel the building imposing upon it.
Can I interrupt you for just 1 second, just
Sure.
for an administrative matter? And Mr. Schomer, maybe you can answer this question. So I'm noticing that the slides here, the numbering is different. For example, this particular slide in this presentation is A12. There were, the earlier one was, I don't know, A11 or something, whatever it was. Have these slides been included in the presentation in the materials delivered to the board?
I can answer that, Mr. Chair. What Tim is going through now, this is the plans that we filed last week turned into a presentation format. So the details are the same. I think he's just outlining it in a more step-by-step process, but I'll be sure to file this PowerPoint presentation with the board tomorrow.
Thank you, Mr. Shermer. That you answered my question. So thank you. We can continue with the presentation.
Just to go a little bit further on that too. Sometimes it'd be with the 24 by 36 inch kind of drawing format. Sometimes it doesn't translate well to the kind of visual medium. The text doesn't really pick up on the screen well. So it's the same exact information, just slightly reformatted.
Thank you. I just want to make sure that we maintain the integrity of the hearing record here, and that what people see is what they expect to see. So thank you.
Absolutely. So moving on here, so here's the site section that we've been showing, same orientation wise. So we're cutting east to west of the site, looking north. As you can see, we have the single building now kind of tucked into the rear here, where the garage is almost entirely beneath where the existing grade is. And then we utilize that front setback to create a bit of a landscape berm that we'll get into more later in the presentation. We have a large section in this area, as well as the landscape plans. But I think what this shows is just kind of the general height of the new building compared to the existing grade and the existing house. So Brush Hill Road itself is at about 104 feet elevation. It's kind of the average from along the front of the site. We've set the garage elevation at 106 feet, which is where the existing grade is, where we have the garage entry. So we minimize the excavation there, where previously we were kind of lifting the whole new site up on a bit of a plinth that was about 4 feet above Brush Hill Road, and it required a lot of fill at the front of the site. We're eliminating that now, and you can see the existing red dash line here is the existing grade where we're cutting this. So just for example, here at the parking plaza, there's just much less requirement for retaining wall than there previously was, where the previous retaining wall was over 100 feet long at the end of the parking, and up to 16 feet tall at some places. We're only at about 45 feet in length here. It doesn't even cover the full width of the parking plaza, and it goes from about it's about 3 feet to 10 feet of the absolute top of the retaining wall, but it only averages about 6 feet in the middle. So we've greatly reduced the amount of retaining wall in this area. And then we set the first floor of the property, which is really the first floor of the residential space, at 118 feet, which is about 6 feet below the existing grade at the rear of the site. So we do maintain a small retaining wall that will go over more when we get the plans. But you can see here at the rear of the site. We just want to do that to kind of keep the overall height of the building down as much as possible. And if you, the existing house sits at that 124-foot elevation, and we have the existing property kind of dashed in also in red here, and you can see that we're only about 6 feet above the height of the existing building. So if you're on the site looking at where the existing house is today, we're only a little bit taller than that itself. We wanted to, we felt it was important to minimize the overall height as much as we could, while balancing not needing a substantial amount of retaining wall. So moving on to, this is the garage level plan. So this is the lowest plan. It's kind of buried into the hill on the entirety of the south elevation, west elevation, and about half of the north elevation. So about half of the north elevation and the west elevation is exposed here. But one of the key things we did was put the entrance to the garage. Previously on the old plan, where we had a garage beneath the rear building, the entrance was at the front and center, so it was really exposed and kind of had a very utilitarian feel to that basement level. In this case, we moved the entrance to the side, so that way the front of the building at the garage level is really entirely hiding the garage itself, and is where the lobby, bike storage, and some utility spaces are located. So coming into the site, we had shifted the driveway south a little bit to preserve the 2 trees here, and then gave the driveway itself a bit of a curve. And we did that for a couple of reasons. It kind of fit the scenic nature of the Partial Road itself. And it also framed the corner of the building, so you're not driving when you enter the site. You don't just immediately look straight back to the rear of the driveway here, where we have the trash enclosure and garage entrance. It kind of frames the more prominent, more public portion of the property. Material wise, the gray shade here is just standard pavement. Beyond the garage entry, we do have grass pavers that are more pervious, that landscape can go over when we get into those plans. And then where you see this tan is another paver material that's impervious for this parking plaza that's all at one level and raised above where the actual driveway is, to kind of create a material separation between those 2 zones. This is much more of a kind of shared visitor parking, surface parking, and kind of pedestrian plaza, and it can be kind of used as both. And you can see a small seating area here in front of the lobby beneath the overhang of the building above. We then have a seating area, kind of mail package within the lobby, and then the elevator and stair for the building, which can be accessed both from the front or from within the garage. The bike storage also can be accessed from the front plaza and from within the garage. We're current of those 30 parking spaces within the garage, 17 are standard, 12 are compact, and we're showing 1 ADA space. Out front of the building, we have 4 standard spaces and one ADA space. For bike parking, we're showing a 1-to-1 ratio. So we have 20 spaces within the bike storage room. 16 of those are within a kind of 2-tier rack system, and then we have 4 spaces that on ground mounted racks if you have a larger cargo bike or something that's a little more easily accessible. And there's sufficient room for more, even more parking. We just left that as 1-to-1 ratio now. We don't want to overpromise. But with that, you could easily add another 8 spaces with another 2-tier rack, or have a kind of fixed repair station in there as well, or have additional ground mounted racks. So we can easily accommodate at minimum a 1-to-1 ratio for secure bike storage. And then out front, we have 2 more racks which hold 4 more visitor spaces. The other thing I want to point out on the garage level plan here is we've dashed in here where the extent of the subsurface infiltration system is, which Civil will go over in more detail. But for now, it's just wanted to highlight that we purposely located it beneath the driveway and the parking plaza, avoiding the kind of landscape berm area, so that way we can have the ability to place larger trees and vegetation here for the purpose of screening the building visually. The transformer is at the kind of front southwest corner, with both water and electric feeding into this utility area at the southwest corner of the building. And then we have room for a small kind of utility storage area off the garage as well. gas would be feeding down the driveway, and the gas meter bank is beyond the garage entry here, with the dumpster enclosure at the very end of the driveway screened by a kind of wood slat fence, which is directly adjacent to the stair access to the rear of the site. And on that, here is the first floor plan. So you can see that stair and pathway wrapping around the building to the rear, where we have that kind of shared patio area with groups of seating, as well as a small lawn area south of that. So the first floor has, the first and second floor are basically identical. They each have 10 units, 4 2-beds, 4 1-beds, and 2 3-beds to the rear, with the 2 stairs, one that direct access to the lobby, and then that second one here that egresses out the rear and also provides access to that patio space. So the patio can be accessed either from that exterior walkway or directly through the building, making it fully accessible given the elevator. The pathway also provides access for emergency personnel from the fire trucks can drive all the way in, about halfway to the extent of the building, and then that direct access on foot to be provided via that walkway. So here is the second floor, so the top floor, which is in layout the same as the floor below. And then the roof plan. So you can see the perimeter of the roof here has the pitch roof, which would be asphalt shingle, as well as a series of gables that we're using to kind of break up and frame smaller portions within the mass. We can get to that in the elevations. But the center portion would just be a membrane roof with that set a few feet below the top of the pitch roof in order to screen the mechanical equipment for the units, which would be housed up here. The elevator overrun is the same height as the top of the gable, so it would be completely concealed from view. We also have an access hatch to the roof from that front stair for direct access, either for emergency personnel or for maintenance of the equipment. So moving on to the exterior, here's just a few precedent images we're showing material-wise. We're maintaining the same materials, mostly a fiber cement and asphalt shingle roof as the previous scheme. But aesthetically, we've kind of altered the direction a little bit. We were previously showing kind of farmhouse style with the white clapboard and high contrast to the windows. We've kind of gone to a more natural tone and darker tone in colors now to kind of set the building visually back a little bit more. It won't stand out as much. We want it to kind of blend in behind the trees. And these are just a couple examples of comparably scaled buildings with the 3 stories and the gable roof that we felt kind of reflected the tone of what we're trying to go for here. Still with so very traditional kind of forms, but very simple kind of modern detailing and a more modern approach to the windows, which we were showing on the previous scheme as well. So here is the north elevation. You can see the grade line at the bottom here. So where it's exposed, we have a kind of a very dark, narrow exposure clapboard to kind of give a heaviness to it that kind of grounds the building. And then we have a series of kind of insets at each unit that we're using like kind of a more natural highlight material to contrast that and stand it out, and it really breaks up the facade a little bit. And then from there, we're using like 2 different colors, a kind of medium blue and a lighter blue, to further break it up kind of horizontally, and then highlighting those portions with these gables. So really your eye reads that gable and those material changes, and you have a series of these proportions that are much more in line with the scale of what's existing in the neighborhood and other single family homes, as opposed to just one kind of larger building. And as you get closer to the rear, we bring out those materials all the way to the ground. We wanted these to feel like there were a series of smaller buildings, kind of almost townhouses placed next to each other that were each individually grounded, as opposed to kind of a single podium with a building that sits on top of that. And where they don't reach the ground at the front here, they are pulled forward and cantilevered a little bit to kind of create a separation in plane. And you can also see the garage entry here, as well as the gas meters. So moving around to the front, the main thing we wanted to do at this west elevation, which is the front from Brush Hill Road, is kind of split it up vertically. So again, we added that more natural accent vertical slit that's set back, and in this case, we put decks at the front. And then added the gable roof to this kind of front corner, which is most prominent and most visible, and really wanted to highlight that as the main kind of feature of the front elevation, and then let this secondary portion of it kind of recede. And there is a series of plantings in front of that. And then as you can see from when we get to the renderings, the landscaping on the berm kind of screen shows that from view a bit as well. So we really wanted to highlight this kind of first, this front half, while kind of recessing the other side over there. So we didn't feel as a full, it really reduced the 65-foot width of that facade. And then we have some glazing and some glazing at the entries to both the bike parking and the lobby in the front as well. You can also see the enclosure, the wood enclosure for the dumpster in the distance here, as well as the stairs that lead you up to the rear. And then the south elevation, which reads, it would be very similar to the north elevation, but it would only read as 2 stories long full width. Again, same materials, same proportions, the same treatment of the gable roofs. It's just, you're not going to read that lower level. So here is a rendering from Brush Hill Road looking up the driveway. And you can see some of the existing evergreens that we're preserving to the left of the frame here. The landscape berm to the right with the plantings on top of that. And then you can start to see a little bit of the parking. But really the element that's kind of jumps out at you is that front volume, while we're trying to kind of push back the other half of the building. And then you can see the kind of pedestrian area in front of the lobby itself. And you can see the gable roofs down the north elevation here. And then sliding to the south a little bit, kind of from the property, from the entrance to the driveway across the street at 939. You can see it from a bit different angle here, where you really start to screen most of the building with those plants in that berm, and you really completely cut out from view the surface parking in the parking area. You can see the bus stop waiting area as well. Just quickly, the updated shadow studies we put together. So this is the summer solstice on June 21st. Given the nature of the sun path this time of year, your highest shadow impacts are going to be to the kind of southwest and southeast. Very minimal impact to the north, given the altitude of the sun kind of midday, which does provide shading to the kind of pedestrian areas at the berm and at the plaza, while having very little impact on any of the butters kind of in the northwest kind of corner. And then looking at the spring and fall equinox on March 21st and September 21st, most of the shadow effects at this point would be kind of due east and due west, where the sun is lowest. To the north, we're still mostly entirely contained within the property line itself. So again, very little impact on the butters to the north and west. And then the winter solstice on December 21st, where very little impact to the east and west, because the sun doesn't get far enough on the horizon. You can see the kind of orange line here is the sun path. With the vast majority of impact will be kind of due north, and with much deeper shadows with this low altitude. But even then, we aren't quite reaching the butter to 924 by Hill to the north. We're also, because of the little impact to the east and west, it keeps the patio area and the kind of landscape area and the plaza area with less shadow impact in the winter when you wouldn't want it. So last slide here architecturally is just the enlarged section at the front that I had mentioned previously. So this is, I know this is kind of specifically requested to show the impact of the view lines from Brush Hill Road and from the abutter across the street. So the top of the berm itself is about 111 feet. So it's about 5 feet above the surface of the parking and about 7 feet above Brush Hill itself. So for a standard height person standing on the east side of Brush Hill Road, you would have basically a fully blocked view of the parking and of the entry to the building itself from the berm. And the building itself would be blocked by the series of sugar maple plantings we have there. So for the sake of this diagram, these are shown at 20 feet. On a previous presentation, we had shown kind of the planting height versus mature height of these trees, and we showed the planting height between 12 and 20 feet, and the 5-year maturity between 20 and 25 feet. So the 20 offers a kind of a good middle ground of where these trees will be between 1 and 5 years. And you can see that even at the tip of that front gable here is blocked from view by those trees on both the east and west sides of Rush Hill Road. And there's actually one more thing I wanted to get back. In terms of the height of the building, per the zoning code itself, the height is to be taken from the highest point of the roof from the average grade of the existing grading. So we calculated the average grade of the existing grade on height to be 115.43 feet. So from that to the top of the building is 31 feet 11 inches for our building height. From the face of from the 106 feet elevation of the kind of garage entry and the parking, the building to the top of that gable is 41 feet 4 inches. So I just wanted to kind of go over both of those numbers and how they compare. And then from there, do we want to hand it over to Aaron, or do we want to pause for questions?
Let's pause for just a moment.
Sure.
I'm going to ask the members of the board, Mr. Gray and Mr. Mullen, if they have any questions. And Mr. Mullen's taken himself off mute. So Jeff?
No questions at this time.
Mr. Gray?
Yeah, none for me either at this time. Thank you.
Okay. Just as a matter of courtesy, Mr. Galvin, do you have anything you'd like to ask at this point, or would you like to hold your fire for a little while?
I'd like to listen to the rest of the presentation.
Very well. Tim, thank you for that. Let's continue on.
Thank you. Erin Hosseini-Fitch from Verdant Landscape Architecture. So just to jump back to some overall context for reference, we are abutting Curry College on both the south and eastern property lines, and then there are single family residences to the north and then also across Brush Hill Road. So then zooming into the overall landscape plan, we have several overall goals for the landscape. The initial goal is to enhance the street edge and to blend the development into the existing character of the road. This enhancement is initially achieved with proposed grows of native trees on the edge of the site to support the existing scenic nature of Brush Hill Road. As many of you may be familiar, the existing front landscape of the site is fairly flat. However, we are proposing a shade tree and grassy knoll, as Tim had mentioned before, to help further mitigate the impact of the development. And then we do have an additional sketch shown in the lower left-hand corner to kind of highlight that berm. The knoll is approximately 6 feet in height and provides a landscape element and buffer in the foreground of the site. And then preserved existing mature white pine trees on the site help to create a sense of scale and further minimize the visual impact of the building itself. And then in addition, from the view from Brush Hill Road, the development is screened from abutters through the use of evergreen plantings along the rear and side property lines. The preserved mature white pines help with the initial establishment of a buffer, and we can see those as there's 2 large existing white pines to remain in the drive entry at the northwestern corner of the site, as well as the north property line. There's additional growth, as we're pointing out. And then lastly, for the residents themselves, the landscape supports residential living. A shared outdoor terrace at the front integrates with the interior lobby, as there's a little patio space by the parking court, as well as a shared outdoor amenity patio that's tucked into the rear of the landscape. And then this amenity patio contains various gathering areas and a flexible lawn space within a garden setting. And then next slide. So here you can see a highlight of the various tree plantings throughout the site. As viewed from the road, there's a grove of native sugar maples residing at the grassy knoll with accent swaths of redbuds and service berries along the front of the site. And then to note, the plantings largely consist of native and habitat enhancing and pollinator friendly species. These species allow for us to create a sustainable landscape and environment within our site. And then next slide. So here we have our site exterior lighting plan. The selected fixtures chosen are dark sky compliant, and they're pictured here on the sheet. And the design team has worked to minimize exterior lighting within the site, both at the drive entry and throughout the site. Our main goal is to provide lighting that's mainly necessary for safety, and we're also considering motion detected lights where possible to help to minimize the lighting further. Many of the fixtures are contained near the building, and the overall design is to have no spillage over property lines. And then the following slide shows an overview of the photometric study that can be viewed for more detail. That's not seen in the lighting plan. And that's the general overview of the landscape. Now passing on to our civil engineer, Paul.
Thank you, Aaron. Paul Matos with Allen and Major Associates. Here to discuss the civil engineering part of the project, more particularly stormwater management here and utilities. If you could go to the grading and drainage plan, Tim. Yeah, if you could just zoom in on the building footprint and grading associated with that. So as you can see here, the proposed driveway is located in the general vicinity of the existing driveway. What we did is we created an apron along Brush Hill Road to maintain the gutter flow of Brush Hill Road and to keep all our drainage within the property. We have a catch basin located at the northerly end there, where all our runoff from the driveway and the access parking areas will be captured by that catch basin. To capture all the runoff from that landscape berm that we're creating, we also created a grass swale along our property line, maintaining all the flow from our development, keeping it on site. And it will be captured by a couple of area drains that will be located in the grass swale and a landscape depression there at the southwest corner of the driveway entrance. The site has been graded with minimal grades of 1 to 2% grading all the way up to the entrance, which is at elevation 106 of the garage. The stormwater management system, which is located underneath the main access road and the parking area in front of the building, will have a total of 45 concrete retainment chambers that are about 3.5 feet high. The stormwater management plan will also include a deep sump hooded catch basin at the entrance. It will include a water quality structure, which is a storm scepter 450i to treat the runoff. And buildings downspouts and the flat roof area of the building will be piped directly into the recharge system, directing clean roof runoff into the system. The proposed stormwater management system has shown a reduction at the northerly property line where all runoff currently drains to. And that runoff reduction is approximately 58% for the 2-year storm. And we've provided a 70% reduction for the higher 100-year event. We also provided snow storage along the shoulder of the road on the northerly side and on the southerly side of the driveway entrance. And then we provided some snow storage on the westerly side of the exterior parking spaces. That's it for stormwater. If we could go to the next sheet for utilities. As you can see from the plan here, we provided some utility corridors here. The existing hydrant located by Brush Hill Road had to be relocated approximately 16 feet to the south to accommodate our new entrance and the turning radiuses to accommodate the fire movement vehicles. So we also have separate services for domestic and fire service along the southerly side going into the utility room in the lower level of the garage. The transformer is located at the southwest corner of the property, and underground conduits would run the electrical service, telecommunications to the utility room inside the garage, lower level of the garage. Gas is being proposed along the northerly side of the driveway entrance, and that will go to the meter bank that was located on the edge of the garage, just east of the driveway entrance into the garage. And in the sanitary sewer, we have 2 separate lines coming out of the building, one for the floor drains from the garage that will connect into an oil water separator. And we also have the residential sanitary flows that will be piped into a sanitary manhole. And those two flows will be combined and tied into the municipal system along Brush Hill Road, tying into the existing manhole that services our development today. So that's the presentation for civil and how it relates to utilities and stormwater. I'll be able to answer any questions that the members may have.
Thank you, Paul. I think that concludes our presentation for tonight. Mr. O'Brien, unfortunately, our traffic engineer was unable to be with us tonight. There's not a lot of new information to present on the issue of traffic. Just to point out, however, that in the submission of materials that we provided last week, we did provide an updated auto turn analysis of the site and sightline analysis of the site, which demonstrates that it is now fully accessible by emergency vehicles of the town of Milton, as well as garbage removal trucks who will access the site and remove garbage from the dumpster in the portion of the building just north of the building, as Tim is showing there in this diagram. So the traffic engineers from MDM will be back at future hearings to describe this in greater detail.
All right, thanks, Mr. Schomer. Mr. Matos, just can we go back to the stormwater management system for a moment? One of those slides, your choice, which one?
Yep.
What sort of maintenance is needed in that, and what sort of maintenance related access is provided for with this particular location for this system?
The underground subsurface infiltration system, we're providing several manhole covers to grade, which you could see on the top right-hand insert there. We have 6 covers to grade. So each one, we have at least a cover by where the inlet pipes would be coming in. So you can definitely see if there's any sediment coming into it, and you'd be able to put a shop vac, not a shop vac, but a vac truck in there to clean out any sediments. And then of course, the deep sump of the catch basins will have to be maintained by, again, using a vac truck to clean out any sediments that are in there. And we also have a storm scepter will be treating some of removing additional TSS that the catch basin does not capture.
What's TSS?
Total suspended solids, which is the granular sediments from sanding operations or any dirt that may come onto the parking lot and go into our catch basins.
Thank you. You're lucky I didn't sound off on a jargon alert, but thank you for that. All right, that's the end of my question. Let me ask Mr. Gray, Mr. Mullen, if you gentlemen have any members of the board have any questions at this particular point in time.
Thanks. Can you reiterate or explain a little bit more how the storm management system as contemplated, as designed, will either be better than, or how does it compare to what the current conditions are, I guess is what I'm saying.
Currently, there's no stormwater management on the property now, so all stormwater runoff drains in the northwesterly direction towards the northerly property lines. All right, there's a little portion of Curry College that has a high point that drains onto our property, and she floats by overland to that northerly property line. And there's also a little portion of Brush Hill Road that drains onto our property and goes towards that northerly property line. So what we've done to control the stormwater runoff is that we created a ridge line along the property line to separate the flows from Brush Hill Road from intermingling with our stormwater that goes into our treated subsurface system. And then we've also accounted for the flow from Curry College to come onto our property, and it just bypasses it and it continues to go to the north. So the proposed system is designed to treat all the runoff from our development. And again, as previously stated, we have a 58 to 70% reduction in volumes heading towards that northerly property line. So there's going to be a tremendous amount of improvements from what's happening today.
Thanks very much. That's what I thought I heard. Wanted to make sure. Thank you.
Yep.
Mr. Mullen.
Can you talk about the accessible path from the building to the public way, how that works?
Yes, so we're providing an accessible path there. You can see the crosshatch area coming from the front doors, the front of the building, that provides a path that's graded at 2% grade. And then we have the access going from the sidewalk by the accessible handicap spot that has a high point that's graded at 1.5%. And then from that high point to Brush Hill Road, it's graded at 4.5%. And then the concrete pad with the bench that's coordinated with the landscape plans is graded at a 1.5% cross slope.
What is the path made out of?
It'll be just a regular cement concrete, unless we decide to do something different, but currently it's just concrete.
Thank you.
Yep.
No further questions.
Thank you. I do have a question regarding the berm that is located at the front. And it strikes me as it has in the past that this is a significant design element from an architectural point of view, from a landscaping point of view. It does have some civil engineering from some drainage related stuff. Mr. Manos, thank you for reminding us about that. But remind me again, what is the proposed height of that berm?
Finished grade at the top of the berm is 111.1.
Okay. So roughly 5 feet from Brush Hill, from the level of Brush Hill Road.
Yeah,
Is
Brush Hill
Road.
Brush Hill Road's around 104 plus or
104.
minus, so we're about 7 feet tall.
Okay. I'm just curious. No particular agenda. Just curious. Why that height? Why not something smaller or something larger? Why 7 feet? I'm not advocating that it be smaller or larger. I'm just puzzled as to the thinking is that landed you at 7.
I can jump in here as well, Paul. So I think one of the primary purposes of the berm is to screen the view of the parking from Brush Hill Road. So putting it kind of just over head height is enough to do that without going any higher with it. We didn't want to go to a height where it was going to be like a too much fill, but we didn't want to, having it at like 3 or 4 feet, it's not really going to have that visual screening impact. So it's really just kind of set at just over head height for that reason.
Right. It reminds me of, in your presentation, you used the phrase "a person of standard height." What's a standard height person?
We were showing the figure in that image is actually a little bit taller. It's about 6 feet tall as the person in that section, and that eye line is shown at about 5'6". So I may be biased to my own measurements, but so yeah, so this figure here is shown at 6 feet tall.
Okay. Thank you. I don't have any further questions at this point in time. Does any other member have any questions?
Nope.
All right.
No questions.
Mr. Galvin, going to give you another quick shot.
Sure. Just a couple of quick questions. First question is on the landscaping plan L1, and I'm sorry I don't have it up in front of me. It shows quite a bit of new landscaping, but that landscaping appears to be mature landscaping. So my first question about the landscaping is, what's going to happen on the site during construction to the existing landscaping and trees? Is it going to be completely stripped of its vegetation by necessity because of construction? And second of all, how many years till you get to a scenario like you envision in this particular plan? Because the trees that here look like they'd be extremely mature and more than 10 years older or older than that. I guess that's my first questions. If you want me to just ask them all, I can ask them all and then they can handle them in order. The second question is, on Plan L3, which is a lighting plan. I wanted to know what, if any, measures would be taken in order to block headlights that for the cars that are exiting the parking garage on the northerly side and exiting the surface parking, to prevent the headlights from basically affecting the Burnett property, which is just northerly, immediately northerly are here. And, you know, is the vegetation the only thing that's there? Is there some fencing that's needed? Something in that vicinity. My next question has to do with the stormwater issues. And I'll just tell you what the issues were. And I think they're a summary of some of the concerns that Mr. Chesia indicated. The plan shows an overflow pipe headed in the northerly direction. And I forget which plan it was, but it was the stormwater plan, I think, that Mr. Matzos was referring to it. Yeah, C103, in the middle of the entrance access area, there appears to be an overflow pipe, and it wasn't entirely clear to us what the distance between the end of that pipe is and the property line, and then whether there are any measures to diffuse any flow there, and what, if any, impact there would be again on the Burnett property. And then the second kind of set of questions is, what type of soil analysis has been done in the area where the stormwater detention and infiltration system is going to be proposed? And has there been any type of mounding analysis? When I was out to the property last week, it wasn't a rainy day, but you could definitely see where water gathers on the existing site. And that is the low point of the property. And Mr. Chesia, who had looked at the site, did find some unsuitable materials at a particular depth in the, I guess there were 2 test pits dug, but you know, none necessarily in the area of the proposed infiltration. And so we want to know if they've completed a mounding analysis. And then I'll just mention it because it's a concern, but I understand traffic hasn't been done. When you go out and you stand there at the estimated entrance to the driveway and you're looking southerly, in a southerly direction, if you're exiting and you're set back about 10 feet as you're required to be to determine sight distance in a southerly range, the sight distance is extremely limited for vehicles traveling the average speed, I think, in that area, according to what I've been told. And you can't actually see past the entrance to the Curry College property, which I understand is permanently gated and has only emergency access. So yeah, there just doesn't appear to be sufficient stopping sight distance. And you'd have to actually pull out into the layout of Brush Hill Road, and the cars are coming, and I saw it again last Friday, cars are coming significantly faster than the design speeds there. And we were concerned about the evaluation of that safety. I guess I'd probably say on a positive note, we do think shifting the building to the rear of the site is a significant improvement.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Galvin. This, Mr. Schomer, I'm gonna ask you to be the quarterback in terms of the folks with your team relative to responding to Mr. Galvin's questions. So,
Certainly, Mr. Chair, I was taking copious notes as Attorney Galvin was speaking. Through you, of course, the first question that I have written down regarding the clearing of existing landscape. The existing site is currently mostly a lawn, a grass lawn. There were a few trees that were shown in the site there. Yep, Tim's got it up here. So Tim, can you go through you go to the demolition plan in the civil drawings and show there are a few trees that are being removed from the site here, or if you could point them out with the cursor, which ones are
Yeah,
staying, which ones are
I
going.
can jump to both and show both. So to Jesse's point, the front of the site currently, where we're kind of adding those sugar maples in the berm, is basically entirely lawn at the moment. The trees, I think you get a good view of them here. The trees that are in this image in the bottom left, to the right of the driveway here are being preserved, and the ones to the left are being removed. So you can tell from these pictures, these trees aren't exactly in the best shape. They are mature, older, taller trees, but they've basically been cleared of all branches up to like 50 feet. So not exactly providing any kind of screening. And I can show you those on the plan too. And then to the, let's get a better view on them. To the kind of south property line here, there is a generous amount of growth at this kind of between the Curry College driveway and kind of our just to the north of that property line. So that will be trimmed back a little bit, and I can show you the extent of that on the site preparation plan. So yeah, so here are those two trees I kind of pointed out. These three will all be these two large evergreens are really the primary ones that we're preserving. Those ones that were along the south of the driveway were the ones that are being removed. There's no vegetation kind of at the center of the site. And then to the south here is where we're starting to pull back a little bit on the existing vegetation that's there. And you can see the kind of extent of that on this plan. But we'll also be, if you jump to the landscape plan now, kind of replanting a lot of what's being removed there. I don't know if Jesse, should I have Aaron come in here and kind of talk about what these species here are?
Yeah, thank you, Tim. And I think that feeds well into the next question that Attorney Galvin had, which was, what is the planting height of those trees that we're proposing, and how long is the time for them to grow to the extent that we're showing here on this plan? Aaron, if you can address that.
Yes, so along the south property line, we're showing along Curry College, we're planting a mix of evergreens, which at install are proposed at about 10 feet height. And along that property line, they are green giant arborvitaes, which are very fast growing species. They're not pictured there, but along that as well, though, the witch hazels and redbuds are also dappled along that property edge and will also be understory plantings. So even where there are more mature trees abutting our site, those trees will still thrive and reach their mature height. And then along the north property line, we have fast planting of evergreen trees, which will also be installed at about 10 feet height. They're a mix of the green giants as well as Norway and blue spruce, and both of those will maintain a low branching habit throughout their lifespan. So even when they are mature, they will still contain that buffering at the grade level. And
oh, sorry, continue.
sorry. And then along Brush Hill, where the sugar maples are the most prominent trees at the grassy knoll, those are spec'd for a larger size. They're about 3.5-inch caliper. So at install, they will be about 15 to 20 feet height already. And those are fairly quick growing, being a maple. So they do grow about 1 foot to 2 feet every year. And then we do have additional sweet gums, which are pictured here, that are accenting the building entries. They're an upright growing species, which will also be installed at about 15 to 20 feet height, and will continue to mature to be about 30 or so to kind of downscale the building as well.
And then to kind of jump in on one more portion of that, with regard to the headlights, the reason we specifically chose evergreen plantings along the north line here to shield headlight glare from the surface parking and from the garage entry. And it's our opinion that just from a visual standpoint, from the abutter to the north, it would be preferable to kind of look at a row of plantings as opposed to just the backside of a fence. So we're going to try to kind of provide that light shielding with planting as much as we possibly can.
And to jump on that too, the part of the berm will act to buffer the headlights as it is roughly that 6-7 feet height. So the headlight height will be more tucked away and not seen when they're in the parking court.
Thanks, Sarah, and thank you, Tim. Mr. Chair, to move on to the next question that Attorney Galvin had, that moves into the civil area. And Attorney Galvin had a question regarding the purpose of the overflow pipe towards the north property line, the distance to the property line, and whether there are measures to diffuse the flow of that. Paul, could you jump in on that?
Yep, the purpose of the emergency overflow is to alleviate any waters that are, any storm events that exceed the design storm, which is designed for the 100-year storm. So water would enter into this overflow standpipe, and then it would flow towards the northerly property line, where we'll have a beehive grate flush with the ground there, and the water would just bubble out of that structure that we have proposed. And again, it's just an emergency overflow for storms that exceed the 100-year storm event. That overflow pipe is located approximately 10 feet off the property line there, as shown on the plan. And it's located at the lowest point on the property. The lowest point on the property is about elevation 101.7. And we have that grade shown at approximately 102 contour.
Thanks, Paul. I think the next question that I have in my notes from Attorney Galvin was had to do with the soil analysis that's been done in the area of the stormwater structures, and specifically whether a mounding analysis was done and whether that's required.
Yeah, so there's been 2 test pits that have been done on the property, one at the southeast corner at the top of the site, and then one at the southwest corner of the site by Brush Hill Road. And it's approximately 30 to 35 feet away from our infiltration system. So we don't have an exact test pit located in the subsurface system. We have one that's adjacent to it. And we also have some team members that have been involved with a lot of projects associated with Curry College. And they're the ones that conducted the test pits, and they've said that the material is consistent to what they found when they did work on Curry College. So we've asked the board members to consider a condition of approval to allow us to do the test pits prior to construction. And once we advance these drawings into construction drawings, to do the test pits inside where the proposed subsurface is. And as it relates to the groundwater mounding analysis, one was provided with the updated revised drainage calculations. And that's included in the package that was submitted to the board.
Thank you, Paul. The last question that I have written down, Mr. Chair, had to do with the sufficiency of the site distance. We'll have to defer that for our traffic engineer to answer when they're here at the next meeting. But I would just refer you and Attorney Galvin to the slide that was presented and provided to the board last week, which demonstrates, in the opinion of our traffic engineer, that there is sufficient site distance. So we'll look forward to reviewing that with the board at a future hearing, and we look forward to feedback from Mr. Reardon regarding that, the sufficiency of that, and as well as Fire Chief Madden. I believe that was the last question Attorney Galvin had, but if I've missed any, please let me know.
No,
Thank you,
that's
Mr.
my question.
Thank you, Mr. Schumer. Mr. Galvin, would you do you have anything additional, or would you like to defer at this time?
I'm all set for now.
Thank you. I think what I'd like to do at this particular point is to give both Mr. Reardon and Mr. Bomer an opportunity to provide some of their initial reactions and comments to this, understanding that they may not have had sufficient time to dive into it, but also understanding that there have been a number of discussions in various stakeholder meetings that have taken place regarding this. For no other reason than B is at the beginning of the alphabet, we'll begin with Mr. Bomer. So good evening, Mr. Bomer. Welcome back to the Board of Appeals.
Thank you very much, and I'm happy to be here. You are correct. We have had working sessions that did, I think, move in a very positive direction. We mainly talked about site planning issues, site planning and overall massing issues. And I think the notion of putting the larger building further away from the street and from the neighbor to the north is the right idea. I think there's been a lot of subtlety introduced into the plans that work quite well. I would include the berming on the front which is particularly, actually the view that you're looking at now isn't the one that really shows the berming, but if you go a little further south, you start to understand how the berming can work to really eliminate the view of the parking, which I think was one of the concerns, that if you do move parking as one of the primary views from the street, then you should think about how to mitigate that. I think the idea of concentrating the units into one building that's elevator fed has some very strong advantages from an accessibility perspective. All of these units will be required to be at a minimum group 1 units, and some of them will be fully accessible group 2 units. I think that's definitely a move in the right direction. I think so what I see, and you are correct, we haven't had a lot of time to look at these images. We've known for a number of weeks the direction that the development team wanted to take the project. So what we're seeing tonight is not a surprise from a planning perspective, but we are really seeing the kind of a tectonic notion of the building for the first time tonight. And I think my very initial reactions are, and again, I don't want to lose sight of, I think the overall concept is significantly better, preserving some of the landscaping, having space to really do effective buffering from the street. All of that helps the building fit much better than I think it did before. I think in my mind where the project is at this point is now embracing the reality that it's a proposal for one large building instead of 2 somewhat smaller buildings. The building is 180 feet long by 65 feet in width. So I think at this point, I think what I would recommend to the development team is working with mitigating the scale of the building. I'm just, again, from having very limited time to really look at it, I think there's much more that can be done to mitigate the scale of the building that will help it fit into the neighborhood better. Even though we know there is potential for screening, that I think the landscape solution is really what's going to make it work the best. And I do appreciate including that perspective that's looking right up the driveway, where you really do see the full size of the building. And that's the one that I would work with. Just a couple of quick ideas. I think the building I think there's a kind of association with that overhang at the lower level that maybe isn't what you want to project. There's a kind of Garrison colonial look that I think in a suburban setting might have connotations that you wouldn't want to pursue. I think there is, I would recommend working harder on diminishing the boxiness of the building. That is more even superficial articulation of the massing. A quick thing I would look at would be changing the roof pitch, keeping the ridge height where it is, but maybe dropping the fascia line down to where the window heads are. That would increase the roof pitch. I think that's most of the homes in that area do have a steeper roof pitch. I think they really, and I think they have made the right move on the west elevation of are making a real articulation of that 65-foot width. That helps a lot. It's particularly visible in that perspective, the more southerly perspective. So I think they've got, I think unlike where they were before, where I think there were some real issues from a site planning perspective, I think they're in a position at this point to push this further and finding that balance point between an acceptance that it is a bigger contemporary building, but still finding that balance point where it fits in a bit better. So those are quick reactions to where we are now. Thumbs up on the site planning approach, the parking approach. I think all of that is better. I support the idea of the screening with the berm and maintaining some of the existing landscaping. But that's where I'm at after not a lot of time to look at it. It's just looking a little too stark for me at this point, but haven't had a lot of time to look at it. So I think that's what I would say at this moment.
Thank you, Mr. Bowman. Let me ask if any other members of the board have any questions or comments for Mr. Bowman.
No questions at this time.
Could you explain a little bit more the comment he made about the Garrison Colonial look being a problem?
Thanks, Nick. I think what I would do is the overhang at the overhang at floors 2 and 3 plus the roof on that really visible west elevation. I would get rid of the overhang, and I think now that you're more than 100 feet away from the street, I think you did that. I think that the reason it is the way it is to provide some additional patio space on the street side. But I think you've got enough slack in the plan that I think I would let the ground level meet the face of the building, so there isn't this big overhang on the building. So expand the first floor footprint, push the patio and parking, whatever that is, 4 feet closer to the street. And I think it would really improve that view of the building. And given that you have a lot of setback at this point, I don't think it would really impose on the street any more than it is, particularly given your really, I think, aggressive approach to landscaping in the new area. So that's what I meant by that. I think there is an association with that, particularly with that roof pitch and having that overhang. I think they're within tweaking range, I think, to make a building that's really better grounded, really meets the ground. It doesn't overhang it in that sense.
Thanks. That's helpful.
Thank you, Mr. Bowman. Thank you, Mr. Gray. Mr. Reardon, batter up.
Evening, everybody. Yeah, so playing on what Cliff said, I think all of the changes have been really responsive and well thought. I still think the challenge is we have a relatively large building, but the way they've placed it on the site has made everything site-wise more efficient, which means less pavement, which means more open space, which means the open space is in better locations, more usable locations. So I think where we are with the site is everything is really well thought, efficient, maximizes the utility of what we have. There are some details that need to be addressed, some missing information that needs to be addressed, but at least at this point, I think the direction they've taken is probably the best it's going to be given the building that they've chosen. I don't see any other improvements that can be made in a gross way. We did a fair amount of communication with the fire chief about fire access, and he seems pretty pleased. One thing I would ask the team is if they have any sort of sense as to where they are in the whole cut fill analysis to see whether, is this a net cut project or is this an import of fill project? I'd be curious to see if they know any of that information. But all things being said, I think we're in a good place. I think there's some still issues that need to be addressed. I would perhaps challenge the team a little bit on the assumption that they have enough testing for this subsurface system. I mean, the standards are pretty clear. You need 2, if not 3 tests within the limit of the system. Yeah, I'm one of those people that doesn't want to overdo it, but I think having just 35 feet away from the closest portion of a 80-foot system, meaning that the far corner is well over 100 feet away, I think we'd all be better off if we had a little bit more data in that regard. So that's probably my biggest concern.
So just to be clear, as an educated amateur engineer, and thank you for the education in previous sessions, Mr. Reardon, you would suggest that at least within the stormwater management system, there needs to be at least one additional test pit, Doug?
Yeah, I think it would be reasonable to request that for at least one more. And where I would place that is near where the emergency outfall is, because then what we'd have is we sort of have a good triangulation of soils on site, as opposed to just having information on the southwest and the southeast corners.
Mr. Schomer, could I ask you to address that concern with your team? You're on mute, sir.
Sorry about that. We can certainly address that. This was part of, we anticipated this as a potential issue, I think. So, it's up to us as a team to figure out how to address it. Regarding Mr. Reardon's comment about the cut and fill analysis, that was provided in the submission of materials. Like Tim's found it here. This was not in the presentation materials tonight, but this does show the proposed cut and fill areas on the site, and the net. It's a little small, but it looks like it's around 5,000 net cut from the site. Yep, there we go. Thanks, Tim.
Thank you.
Mr. Reardon, is the maybe I have flashbacks to a previous hearing, but is the stormwater management of sufficient size and design to do what it's supposed to do? We've just gone through a hearing where I forget the number of different iterations for a stormwater management system we had.
Yeah, all indications are from the analysis that it's robust. And when you design the systems, you're designing for multiple storms. And usually what ends up happening is one of the storms is the challenge, which means in all the other storms, you end up having this excess capacity. So I think what we've got right now is a pretty robust system.
So this system is designed with excess capacity to handle a greater than 1 in 100-year storm, or am I mixing my metaphors there?
No, you're correct. So it has the ability to manage the 100-year storm, but it has volume above that flood level. So the water rises up to a certain level within the system. There is space above that. So clearly the system can handle something higher than a 100-year storm. And it performs differently in different storms, the net result being how much runoff leaves the site. So very little runoff now leaves the site because of the size of the system. So, a lot of the water that's entering the system is being infiltrated. Not very much, if any, is going to be running off the site.
All right, thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Reardon, again, from Mr. Gray or Mr. Mullen?
No questions.
No questions.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Schomer, at this point in time, is there anything in addition that you'd like to add?
No, I don't believe so, Mr. Chair. As we move forward through future hearings, we look forward to hearing the board's detailed feedback as you have a chance to look at the plans in greater detail. Excuse me, as well as that of the peer reviewers. And we do appreciate that they're seeing this plan in only a fairly short notice of about a week. So there may not have been time for a full review of the plans. So we look forward to Mr. Bomer and Mr. Reardon taking the time to review the plans and providing us with their feedback. In addition to that, I would suggest that we probably work now to try to set up a further working session, particularly on the issues that Mr. Bomer raised with respect to the design of the building, to see what can be done to improve the appearance of that and create a better street front and appearance for neighbors that he's comfortable with. But nothing other than that for us tonight, Mr. Chair. We appreciate your time and that of the peer reviewers and Mr. Galvin as well for his feedback.
All right. What I propose to do, I'm going to ask Mr. Galvin is that if there's anything else he'd like to add. And what I would like to do at this point in time is just, once I do that, let's have a little conversation about next steps, next hearing, deliverables, that sort of stuff. And then once that's done, what I'd like to do is I'd like to open it up to members of the public to see if anyone who's been watching the hearing has any questions or comments that they'd like to make. But before I do that, Mr. Galvin, anything else you'd like to add or suggestions that you'd like to make? I also note that some of the materials that Mr. Chesia had prepared were submitted. I don't believe that Mr. Schomer or his team has had an opportunity to review them, so maybe that's better left to the next meeting, but I'd like to give you an opportunity to add anything you'd like to at this particular point.
Sure. I think Mr. Chesia, who's not available tonight, would be prepared to attend the next session and explain any of his comments. You know, we also didn't have a lot of time to go through everything. We did as expeditiously as we could last week. If the next meeting is going to be on the 26th, would be prepared on that night to have Mr. Chesia be present and speak.
I think the next meeting's the 22nd by my.
Okay, I may have.
Check me if I'm wrong.
Wrong.
Yes, it's the 22nd.
Okay.
Thank you. So, all right, then let me propose that this is what we do for planning purposes. So, Mr. Schomer, thank you first of all for your presentation and for getting all of those materials in a timely fashion. It was great to have them a couple of days beforehand so that I could and members of the board could play with them a little bit. So I appreciate that very much. At the next meeting, I think, subject to comment by members of the board, that we should probably spend just a couple of minutes with your traffic person, given that some of those issues have arisen. So I'd like to do that, and then we can finish that off. I'd also like, at some point in time, you also provided us with a fairly extensive list of proposed waivers at some point in time. And I think that time may be coming. We should probably begin to take a look at those, as well as there was a mention a couple of times during the various presentations, the possibility of various conditions. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I haven't seen any proposed conditions. So we should probably start thinking about that stuff as well. At least so that we have it on the agenda.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I think that's a good idea. In previous hearings, we've certainly spent one or more evenings just on the waiver list itself. So there's certainly plenty to talk about there. We have not submitted a list of proposed conditions. We're happy to do so, though typically that happens more towards the end of the process. But we're certainly happy to get out ahead of that and provide a list sooner rather than later.
I'm happy to have it later, and I'm thinking about things to do here, so just laying things out. Mr. Galvin, I think at the next hearing, it's probably once the traffic stuff is done with Mr. Schomer and the applicant, that we would switch that part of the hearing over to some of the comments that you've submitted with Mr. Chesia and perhaps some of the other things. Thank you for Mr. Chesia's submission, and I will make the same request to you that I had made to Attorney Schumer, is that if you have any materials, please sooner rather than later is helpful. Understanding that it is what it is in terms of running a practice. So we
Exactly.
appreciate that. What would be your plan for the next meeting? Just you have an idea of what you'd like to lay out for the in terms of, would it just be, I'm just trying to manage the time for the hearing. Would it just be Mr. Chesia? Would there be other?
Mr.
material?
Cheshire was also consulting with a traffic engineer.
Mhm.
And it's possible that, I think we have an understanding of the amount of traffic that's being generated. I don't think there's a significant disagreement about that. Our issue had to do with the site distance and site distance triangles that one would normally expect to see on a plan like this to show that you have it. I think we would focus on that issue only. But I can't be more specific at this particular moment. But it wouldn't be more than that. And I do have a couple of people that when it comes to an appropriate period of time, I think would like to weigh in, including Stefan Burnett, Mr. Newman, who lives across the street, and one or two more, but that doesn't have to be while we're dealing with the experts. Those are more lay opinions.
All right, thank you, Mr. Galvin. I just want to have an idea so that I can manage the time for the hearing. So of course, it's up to you how you want to present your case, as it always is. So thank you for that. I have the benefit of working with some very well-regarded, very experienced board members who have also chaired hearings far larger and more complicated than this one. So Mr. Mullen, Mr. Gray, any words of wisdom, any suggestions going forward here?
You're doing just fine.
I agree with that wholeheartedly.
Well, even a blind squirrel finds a nut once in a while. So, all right. At this point in time, what I'd like to do is, Ms. Rich, what I'd like to do is I'd like to see if there are any members of the public who have been participating at watching the hearing, and whether they would, anybody would like to make a comment or like to ask any questions or anything like that. So what I would ask you to see if anyone has raised their hand and would like to be recognized to speak before the board.
There's nobody right now. Oh, hold on 1 second. Someone just raised their hand. I'm gonna move them over.
I don't care.
All right. Good evening and welcome to the Board of Appeal. Bjorn Nolson.
Yeah, actually, it's my husband. It's Becky Simons. And I just had a couple of comments.
Becky, hold on 1 second. I just have to get some preliminaries out of the way. So, Becky, thank you. First of all, welcome to the Board of Appeals, and we appreciate your comments. Just what's your address, Becky?
It's 1053 Brush Hill Road.
Thank you. The floor is yours.
Okay, so I at a previous hearing, there were some graphs that were shown, or some kind of transportation studies that talked about riding a bike and walking to the Reedville station. And I actually walked from 936 Brush Hill Road one day to the Reedville station. And it took me 22 minutes, which did not include having to wait for any traffic lights or crosswalks. And when I got to Reedville station, I literally was there in the front of the station. And if you know the station, you have to walk across the parking lot, which is rather large, up over a stairwell to one side for trains. And then there's a set of stairs near actually the entry to the station that you have to walk up for the Reedville line. The other line is the Franklin line. Anyway, so I would guesstimate that if you walked there from 936 Brush Hill Road, going down Brush Hill Road, it would take you about 30 minutes to get to the station. Also, I walked from 936 Brush Hill Road down Cushing Road straight onto Faraday Road and took a left onto Washington Street. And it took about 12 minutes to walk to the playground. I just wanted to see, what it was vis-a-vis these graphs that had been shared. And I think that had said it was like, I don't know, an 8-minute or 10-minute walk, and the walk to the Reedville station was something similar. If you continued from that playground straight down that road, you would come to the Stop and Shop, and that, was a 15-minute walk as you proceeded again to the parking lot of the Stop and Shop. If you continued that route on Truman Highway to Neponset Valley Parkway to get to the Reedville station, I did not walk that entire distance, but that would easily be a 45-minute plus walk. So just for the record, I just wanted to share that. I also had a couple of questions about how many plugins for electric cars were there going to be in the garage. I thought he mentioned maybe 2. And if we're really moving into the place of electric vehicles, I don't think 2 would quite cut it. I also wondered what kind of renewable energy might be looked at in this building. If somebody mentioned gas, it was gas brought in for heating. That could be obsolete, soon. The other question I had was with regard to the building. I didn't quite see how a fire truck could get in to one half of the building. So it looked like the building length, I'm glad somebody shared it, is 180 feet long, which is pretty long. And it felt like, looking at the diagrams of the building, that the fire truck could only get to half of that length. So I wondered how would it be for an emergency vehicle like a fire truck to to deal with a fire in the other half of the building that it seemingly couldn't get to. And let me see, do I have any other questions here? That might be it. I did also appreciate Mr. Bomer's comments about making the building as less boxy to fit into the neighborhood, make more gables, make it, less like an apartment building in the middle of a neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Simmons. I think, Mr. Schomer, this whole issue of renewable energy and environmental related stuff has come up several times. I think at one point in time, the applicant had addressed it. I think it's worth making a note to take a look at this and revisit it. I did note that in the design, well, there didn't seem much from a renewables point of view. So I'd like to put that on the applicant's radar screen and to revisit that. I know that there are potential trade-offs, height and whatnot, but at least it bears some mentioning. Relative to fire access, I know that there have been, and Mr. Reardon alluded to it in his comments, there have been more than one conversation concerning fire access, and I understand that the fire chief has weighed in pretty heavily on this and is satisfied with the access at this particular point in time. I believe at some point in time, it may be necessary for the board to have the fire chief, but we traditionally in these hearings have a town night, if you will, and that could be potentially something that we would make note of on that. So, Ms. Simmons, thank you for your comments. We appreciate that. Thank you for participating in this evening's hearing. Ms. Rich, has any other person raised their hand?
No, there's nobody else right now.
Okay, so given that we're close to the 2-hour mark, why don't we begin to wrap things up? But before I do so, I'm going to ask once again if either Mr. Gray or Mr. Mullen have anything that they'd like to ask or any comments they'd like to make at this point in time.
No further
Thanks.
questions.
Thank you. So next steps. So next meeting is the 22nd at 7 a.m. Mr. Schomer, traffic, couple of other odds and ends. Mr. Galvin, we'd like to hear from Mr. Chesia and whatever else. Mr. Reardon, Mr. Bomer, Mr. Galvin, Mr. Schomer, I think a stakeholder meeting. Love to see one take place over the next 3 weeks. TikTok, gentlemen, as I mentioned, we're beginning to run out of hearing dates, and that's another thing that I'd like people to think about is, do we need more hearing dates? I don't need hearings for sake of hearings. I got enough of those in my professional life. I do this for fun. So, but I want to make sure that we are doing this correctly. I want to make sure that we get the best product out there, whatever that product may be, if there is a product at all. So let's keep that in mind. I'd love to hear from folks. So with that, Mr. Schomer, Mr. Gowan, is there anything else that I've missed or we may need to have on the agenda for the next meeting?
Nothing that you've missed, Mr. Chair. I will put it to our team on their to-do list to address the issue of renewable energy, EV charging and issues of that nature. So we'll be prepared to address that at the next hearing as well.
I think you've hit everything, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Well, okay. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for your time and attention this evening. For the members of the public, thank you for hanging in with us, and we appreciate your participation in this evening's hearing. And with that, I bring this evening's hearing to a close. Thanks, everyone. And Mr. Gray, I didn't know if you had a comment or if you were waving goodbye.
I was waving goodbye.
Okay. On that note, with Mr. Gray waving goodbye, good evening, everyone. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Everyone.